if you've been to my panels, you might hear a lot of very similar things because I try to aim for consistency, but thanks for tuning in. My name is Adu-Poku. I'm a 5th-year member of the McMaster men's basketball team and a founder of the Reach series. And I'm more than happy to present Coaches Talk 2. The organization I've created revolves around helping people, see their worth outside of their sports and careers, just so they could get a lot more out of their sports and careers, if that one makes sense to you. But a lot of this is also based off of lessons I learned through playing basketball in my life and just things I feel you could all take in yours. But when I think about this event today, the most important thing when you consider the pandemic and a lot of the things going on is just this idea of creating a sense of community. And if you've been to a lot of my previous events, you notice that I had predominantly men as my panelists, as my moderators, and I just thought it's really important to switch that script just so we could find venues and avenues to really support and uplift women. And that is why we have all these amazing panelists and moderators today. That's why I'm more than happy to facilitate this space, especially because of the fact that we're going to hear from not just these seasoned moderators who can, facilitate great conversation, but, these amazing panelists and leaders who have just really helped to advance and develop the game of basketball in Canada. So we're going to get into a lot of new topics. I know there are some things you might, be used to hearing, like talking about the pandemic, talking about certain things we could do. But right now, we're just going to really focus on, with the panelists and the moderators we have, we're going to take into consideration their backstories, a bit of their personal lives, and just how we could, integrate that into an organic conversation that you may hear things that if you've been to panels that they've attended before, you might learn something new. And I'm just more than happy to facilitate this environment. So I'm just going to get through some housekeeping rules just for the sake of making sure this could be a smooth process. The first thing I'm going to say is I ask that viewers stay muted throughout the whole time. I'm just kindly asking you to do so we can really respect and give that platform to the panelists and moderators. Any profanity or just general nonsense won't be tolerated. This is a respectful, brave space in which we're facilitating. We will prompt you on the chat sometimes to talk and give your 2 cents, because I just really didn't want to do a Zoom webinar because I feel like in those cases, it's really easy to feel a disconnect in an already disconnected virtual world we're living in. I just ask that, again, you respect 1 and 2 in that process. Number 4, the panelists and moderators, if you want to, are comfortable being asked questions privately through the chat, just like I said, make sure you adhere by rules 1 and 2, just really be respectful. And then for the 5th question, or the 5th kind of housekeeping topic, for each question, we've geared them each towards 2 of the panelists to speak towards, although everyone will speak. But this is mainly due to time constraints and just because of the fact that we want to make sure that every panelist has their spot to speak to a lot of organic things. But I've done my share of the talking, and I just really want to, get things started. So I'm going to give it off to Nemo and Danielle to really get things going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Posse, for this. Again, super incredible event, and so grateful that it's happening again with some incredible female coaches in Canada that are killing it right now. And to start off, before we get into introductions, we wanted to start a little icebreaker. And I'm going to start off, on my screen now, Coach Tamara, question for you. So I would like you to share either something that you have learned, inspired, or like about one of the other panelists that are on here today.
Oh yeah, I guess that one's easy. My national team coach, Lisa, I learned how to just go after what I want and be who I was made to be on the basketball court. Don't second guess and just go for it. So definitely Lisa.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, Lisa, you're up.
Okay, well, I guess I would naturally swing it to Teresa, who had such an impact on my life and coaching career. Probably talk more about this later on, but probably just taught me how to, what hard work was. Just start there, and I'll end there as well. So I'll swing it to Tree.
Thanks, Lise. I will say that I have learned a lot from really, honestly, every woman on this panel. We all know each other. Whether we've coached together against each other, or whether we've coached some of them. So I've learned a lot from everyone on this panel. I have learned from Danielle Boiago just how far you can take yourself when you are a dedicated athlete. And she never ceased to surprise me as an athlete in our program, and just taught me to continue to push our athletes, because their ceiling is sky high. And even when they're doing great things, they will surprise you and do even greater things. So yeah, that's what I learned from Coach D.
You weren't supposed to choose me, Coach. I'm going to pass it to Coach Lee, who's just been killing it with diversity and inclusion and just teaching so much to all of us. So Coach Lee, go for it.
Thanks, Dee. Hated guarding you, by the way. I have two, okay, because I'm extra. So sorry, I did want to acknowledge I'm tuning in from Nova Scotia here on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Inu people. So my first is Jessica, because she taught me how to just ball. If you're from my generation, you knew who the Roque sisters were. You know who the Sultan prospects were. Shout out to Fergie Neves. So Jess showed me how to go out there and like kill it. Doesn't matter, girl, guy, you're killing it on the floor. Second is Coach T. I remember attending the NCCP Super Clinic at McMaster a few years ago after she won. And I was like, Coach T, like, what was the difference maker? Like, what? And pretty much in as many words, Coach T talked to me about preparation and how what led to their championship was the preparation that started the April before. So thanks, Coach T. And I'm gonna, oh wait, can I pass it to anyone? I'm passing it to Coach Jess.
Thanks, Lee. I was gonna shout you out right back. So similar to I think Danny is just, I wanted to shout out Coach Lee for all the work she's done with the BCAA and beyond just our sport and what she's doing across the country. I think that's really awesome, not just from a young coach, but from a coach who has her fingers in, I'm sure, many different pots. So shout out to you, Lee.
All right, I think we went through everybody. I mean, honestly, for me, I am learning every single day from all of these coaches, along with so many others. And like Tamara said, there are some goats here. You know, Coach Teresa, she's been around for a while. She's big time. You know, Coach Lisa, who's running Team Canada, pretty much. So huge shout out for you for being here, Danny as well. Like, I'm just super excited and so excited for everyone else to be listening and tuning into this. And before we start getting into the questions today, just wanted to do a little intro, get all the coaches and panelists to just give a little introduction of who you are, where you coach. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And you know, a lot of you guys have done so many incredible things. So we will be, picking out those little things that you guys missed out, like Tamara being an Olympian for one, So I'm gonna start with you again, Tamara. If you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Tamara Tatham. I have been coaching for 4 years. This year is my first year as an interim head coach at the University of Toronto. Prior to coaching at the University of Toronto, I've been playing basketball. I've played basketball my entire life. I've played 10 years professional in 5 different countries. And I've been on the Olympic team for 10 years as well. So I've been to 2 different Olympic games, couple world championships. I mean, I've had an exceptional career as a basketball player, and I'm going into coaching, and it seems like a seamless transition. It has been seamless, and it does come with its challenges, but I am really, really enjoying this new phase of my life. So that's a little bit on me in a short little stint. Do you want me to pass it, Nemo?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I'm gonna pass it to Jess.
I'll keep mine super short. Hi, I'm Jess Roque, originally from Mississauga, Ontario, and I am the current women's basketball head coach at the University of Waterloo. I also played down south in the state for a number of years. I also started my coaching career there, and I'm really excited to be on the panel today. I'm gonna pass it off to Coach Burns.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Teresa Burns. I'm the head coach at McMaster University. going into, I believe, my 29th year at Mac. Was at Ryerson for 4 years prior to that, and did my undergrad and played at the University of Toronto for my mentor and dear friend, Michelle Belanger, who just retired at the University of Toronto. So just feel very, very fortunate to have been at Mac for this number of years and to have been surrounded by so many amazing coaches and athletes, not only in our program, but in all of our programs at Mac. So Kwasi, and to our moderators, thank you so much for this tonight. I think any opportunity to celebrate women in sport is fantastic. So thanks for having us. I guess we're going over to Coach Lee.
Thank you, Coach T. I'm Liana Osei, or everyone calls me Coach Lee. I am the women's basketball coach at St. FX University in Nova Scotia. I'm in my 3rd year of coaching. Prior to this, I was coaching in Ontario, where I was born and raised, in the OSBA. And I've been coaching boys basketball for a number of years, and I'm really excited to be here. Oh, I gotta pass it. Point guard. I'm gonna pass it to Danielle.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and especially thanks to Kwasi for setting this up. We have 2 all-time GOAT legend coaches, and then we have 3 up-and-coming inspiring coaches as well. So I'm super excited to hear from them tonight, and I'm super excited for all of you to be able to hear from them, and we have some good questions lined up. So Coach Lisa, with that being said, last but definitely not least, go for it.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, my name's Lisa Thomaidis, and I coach at the University of Saskatchewan. I had the pleasure of being coached by Teresa Burns for 3 years, her first 3 years at McMaster. So that was a treat. So much so that I decided to go into coaching. And I've been at the University of Saskatchewan for 22 years now, and am also the head coach of our national team. So had the pleasure of coaching Tamara for a number of years and seeing her and all of her success along the way. So again, thanks to everyone for being here tonight and taking time out of your Sunday. And thanks to Kwasi for arranging this. So looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for all those introductions. Based off of what all these coaches have said so far, I'm assuming, just like everybody else, like myself, everyone must be super excited to hear what these incredible coaches have to say. So let's kick off with the first question. Again, I apologize, Tamara, I'm going to pass it to you again to start. What is a big challenge / learning experience you have faced in your career, past or present, and how have you dealt with it or are currently overcoming it?
Great question, Nemo. I would say I think this is a challenge that a lot of coaches have faced during this year, which is COVID. That's probably my biggest challenge that I've faced as a coach. First year as a head coach, and I got COVID. So that's been the biggest challenge for me in terms of dealing with figuring out how to get through this year of COVID. But it's a year that everyone had to deal with it, right? It's not just the coaches that had to deal with it, it's also the athletes, staff, and a lot of people don't see the stress that it also puts on coaches. So it's been a tough year. And we're just trying to get through it. We're doing everything we can. Every week is a new week. I mean, you could even say every day is a new day that brings us challenges. And I'm someone that likes to be super organized and plan ahead. And you really can't during this time. You got to learn how to coach on the fly, teach on the fly. And that's something I've learned during this time of COVID. So that's been good. That's been my biggest challenge. I would also say that I've also learned how to coach and teach in a different way, right? You are literally having to do everything different. I had my plan of what I wanted to do and how I wanted it to look on the court, and going in and coaching a group of athletes as a head coach, and I didn't have an opportunity to do that, right? I had to figure out how to do it differently, whether it was on court, in an online session, recruiting, communicating with our athletes on and off the court. It's been tough, but it's something that I've learned a lot about, and I feel like I've been excelling in a number of ways. So that's my biggest challenge.
Sorry, no, thank you so much for sharing that. I think, like you said, COVID has definitely, it's a roadblock for everybody. It was something that you said that stuck out was the fact that you had this incredible plan to, you know, start coaching your first official year, right? And things change. So just coaching on the fly, I think, is something so important that a lot of people still have to learn. Me too, for sure. I would definitely want to, considering that you are a new coach, first year, I would like to hear about Jess's experience. What are some challenges or experiences you have faced that have been challenging that you're kind of overcoming?
Yeah, I think the same sentiments that T just talked about, being a first year head coach and having all these great aspirations for a program, and then all of a sudden being put to a halt and not having a season. But even prior to that, last year when I was with Ryerson, we lost the OUA championship on our home floor, and that was disappointing, to say the least. But I think, you know, in this, or what the game has taught me, is that, you know, disappointment comes up in a lot of different ways. And, you know, we're seeing that now globally in how we carry out our day-to-day life. But the biggest learning point that I've kind of taken away from that game, and I've tried to apply, like T said, on a day-to-day basis, is like, how do I want to show up? Because it's really easy to feel sorry for yourself or to make excuses when things don't go your way. But I know it's really important, not just for myself, but for the athletes that I lead, that they see that that I'm taking things in stride just the same way they are. And so sometimes seeing that and being able to model that can be encouraging in itself. And, you know, this is something we probably hear often, is you know, you have to get outside your comfort zone to learn. I think all of us in this past year have been put in really uncomfortable situations where we are disappointed. We haven't been able to see family members. We haven't been able to play. We haven't been able to connect the way we want to. But then my next question, and this is my daily kind of reminder, is how do I want to show up, and what that looks like. And some days I'm not my best, and I have to be okay with that, but I can't be okay with staying that way. And so the challenge for me right now is finding ways to make sure those days don't happen in sequence, and to find better days to come.
No, that's incredible. Showing up every day and how you want to be seen. I'm taking notes, like mental notes right now, for real. But with that being said, I would like to hear from the other coaches for sure. I mean, considering that we just heard from 2 first-year coaches, I would like to hear from, I mean, Coach Lee, Coach Lisa, and Coach Teresa as well, on if they have any different experiences or challenges they have faced in their career.
Go ahead, Tree.
You know, there's going to be challenges every day, and nothing. I can't imagine anything's going to match what we faced in this last year. But certainly there are challenges every day, and I hope coming out of this year that, you know, what we talk to our athletes about, and is just that they are learning to handle adversity in a situation none of us could have ever put together for them. You try to put situations to stress your athletes a little bit, put them in game situations, put them in pressure situations. I can't imagine us ever dreaming up anything like this. So I hope coming out the other side, we all come out as better people, and people that are able to handle adversity, and hopefully perspective. You know, when you do have a bad practice, or I hope our athletes are grateful that they had a practice, and don't get down, and just kind of get over that hump and move on. And so lots and lots of good learning can come from this if we keep an open mind and keep some perspective. And you know, that's what we're trying to talk to our athletes about right now anyway.
Well said, Coach Teresa. I think some challenges that I faced in my 3-year career, the first I would say is probably just fending for my female athletes in comparison to our male counterparts. I feel like since day one, that's kind of what I'm constantly trying to push against the status quo. And I'm at an older school. Things have been going the way that they've been going for years and years and years. And being the first female coach at the in the department, I think has shaken things up, to say the least. But yeah, I think just trying to, really say, hey, why don't our girls get this? And so I know everybody probably saw a lot of the NCAA controversies around equal treatment. And I don't think this is something that's St. FX specific, but I'm saying for me as a coach, I feel like that a lot. So I'm always trying to find what I can do. What are the controllables that I can have for my players? And then through that, with some of the EDI lens, really looking at, which one of my athletes and which one of our athletes here in our department, whether they're alumni, whether they're current, are really disproportionately affected. And so when we look at how we do sport and how we do youth sport in relation to things like AFAs and mental health supports and counseling, it's also something that has really been on my radar for the last few years. And then lastly, I would say as a Black female, I feel like I'm originally from Toronto. It's my first time really making a big move like this out to Nova Scotia, but you constantly feel like because, I constantly feel like I have an X on my back in many cases, and not to say like someone is after my job, but more so because I feel like I'm representing so much. So I think every day I'm kind of always considering that.
I'll bring up the rear, I guess. Oh, sorry, Nemo. We're gonna hand it off to
No, go on. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely the COVID world in this year has been far and away the biggest challenge that I've ever faced and our team has ever faced. Don't want to continue to say a lot of the same things, but I would say my other biggest challenge was probably, again, similar to you, Coach Lee, is just moving across the country to a place I'd never been to and didn't know a soul in the community, and just trying to take a program that was probably the worst in the country, and figuring out what you're going to do with that, how you're going to break into the community, how you can, bring your team to relevance when it hasn't been, how to make your players feel like they're winners when they haven't been. So I think that was a gigantic challenge at the beginning. And then it was, how can you get over the hump? How can you win that first championship? For me, it was, how can you make it to playoffs? Like, are we ever going to get to playoffs? So anyway, those were tremendous challenges. And I think if anything, it makes you grateful and appreciative for, when you can achieve some of those benchmarks for your program and for your players. But I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, a few common things that I noticed you guys were all saying was, with adversity is moving forward. Like you can't push a brick if it's just standing there, but if something's already in motion, it's easier for you to push it, right? And Coach Teresa mentioned the fact that COVID is a perfect example, or I mean, not and to say like COVID is great, but it has brought it is adversity within itself. So that ability to even push through this is going to be a major step. But I think one thing that I want to say to all of you coaches is the fact that not only are we in a pandemic and we're all experiencing the same kind of issues, but you guys all have to deal with that adversity, with dealing with it with yourself, but then also your teams. I think that's something so special that you guys are all just so focused on, making sure that your players are right, but also making sure you guys are also right. Like Jessica mentioned, in a sense of, how am I going to show up every day? I think that's so important. And I'm going to pass it on to Kwasi for the next question that kind of leads into what he's going to present right now. Thank you again, coaches.
And thanks for that, Nemo, because when I think about how your question transitions into mine, a big overarching theme, not just in this conversation right now, but my other panels, has just been this idea of perspective and just understanding that, beyond what the coaches do on the sidelines, you all have a life outside of it where you're, just trying to make the most out of your 24 hours the same way all of us are. So when I'm thinking about, not just your coaching habits, but, your training habits with your team and how you go about, taking care of business, the first people I'm going to extend this question to are Coach Burns and Coach Lee. You two could, decide who's going to go first. But the question I want to ask is, just for the sake of perspective and helping maybe even like fellow panelists may realize things you're saying, but also for the attendees here, you know, what's a day in the life of coaching like, especially in ways that people may not realize necessarily, because some people may just think, oh, you get to run a team and, you know, you're just talking about basketball all the time, but I know there's so much more to it than that. So I just love to hear your thoughts and perspectives on this.
Go ahead, Lee.
Thanks, Coach T. I'm trying to think if I should answer this question as like a pre-COVID or during COVID. And at St. FX, we're in a little bit of a unique situation because we've had like full-on in-person classes. So that's meant for me that I teach 3 times a week throughout the course of the year. But it also means that we've been on the court kind of 4 to 6 times a week as well. So I find like the biggest coaching habits that I've tried to establish is just being a master of routine, and like just being younger and kind of on a whim doing things that I want to do and jump in here and go in there. Like when I was back in Ontario, I would be in every gym as much as possible. And I think as I kind of settled into my young coaching career, I'm more trying to be a lot more routine based, starting my day off the same way. I mean, I probably have eaten the same breakfast for like the last year and a half, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. But a day in the life, I'll give you maybe a COVID in this COVID year. So, I mean, I've been, like Coach Lisa said, for our program, it's really been about a transformational shift and taking a program that has had some tough years and then bringing us back to that level where we're community driven, where we're representing the school appropriately and all of our values. So I start my day off, and a couple of times a week, I actually do some community basketball training with some of our prospective athletes. So my alarm will go off at 6:30 or something like that. I'll get a good hour in before those kids need to get to school. Then I'll typically have a workout myself and just kind of practice good self-care habits. Then I get home, get a good breakfast, get in, and then it's kind of like the daily administrative stuff, whether it's doing some paperwork. I'm always trying to, I mean, I like to call it professional development, but I just love watching basketball. That's probably been the biggest, the biggest advantage of being a full-time coach. Like I'll pull up on YouTube anything from the recent NBA highlights to EuroLeague stuff. I always watch our practice the day before the next practice. And so that's something that's part of my daily routine. Depending on the day of the week and where it falls in the month, I do player check-ins. So I meet individually with all my players each month, but depending on what day it is. Yeah, I typically will teach. And when I'm not teaching, I'm planning for the next class, which I don't think that's the way you're supposed to do it, but that's kind of how I do it. And it's worked the last few years. And then I get to practice planning, and I flip that practice plan off to my assistant coaches. And I don't have like any full-time or kind of lead assistants. And so a lot of the kind of preparation and stuff kind of falls to me. Fortunately, everything's really close by. So I'll set up for practice. Depending on the day and the players, I also take a lead on our individuals as well. Outside of weekends, I'm usually the one that's around the clock. So I'll have 1 or 2 players in usually at a time. I love the skill development stuff. Then we have practice. I grab the practice on the iPad, get home, and then I get ready to do it again the next day.
I just want to clap it up for that very meticulous schedule. I feel like you walked me through your day, and I felt like I was in it for a second, but
it's the same every day.
But even just thinking about what you're saying, you know, I think Nemo touched on it, where you're also responsible for so many other people. You know, it seems like in a world where so much is unstable at the moment, just to have some sense of stability must do wonders for your mental health, especially because of the fact that, you know, you have your own trials and tribulations in your daily life, but you're also indirectly responsible for the young lives that you're shaping as well. So it's just amazing that you're finding that stability within yourself. And I just had one question before passing it off. You know, you said you teach in the words of PT, you know, I saw my coach here. He says this all the time and I don't want to say it, but, you know, I'm just curious, you know, what do you teach?
Oh, I teach skills. I teach in our human kinetics department. So if we're not in person, then I teach theory. And this is my first year with basketball, which I love. So I got everything from documentaries to books and all that kind of stuff. But because we're in person, we do a lot of skills work.
That's so dope. That's so dope.
Yeah, it is pretty fun. It's nice to do something and not have, like, it's not so with my athletes, and so it's just a different kind of dynamic.
Yeah, just to like diversify things up for sure. It's always nice to branch out. I guess now I'm just gonna pass it over to Coach Burns.
Thanks, Quasi. Well, I don't know that my day would be all that different than Coach Lee, and I'm not sure. I'm sure the other coaches are somewhat of the same thinking. I think the thing I wanted to highlight is something that Quasi just said, and is obviously it's just the number of people you interact with in a day, and the number of different roles of the people that you interact with in a day. When I talk to people, and when you do kind of explain your day the way Coach Lee just has, and you're off to recruit a high school athlete and talk to her and her family, and you're back to deal with your university age athletes, and you're sitting on university committees, and you're dealing with people in your community, and you're doing a radio show, and the scope of what you do and the number of hats you wear as a coach is pretty unbelievable. And I think when you first get into it, to refer back to one of the previous questions in terms of challenges or surprises or things that you learn, learning the number of hats that you have to wear as a coach is really an eye-opener, or at least it was for me. You have a lot of people that need your support, deserve your support, that you want to support. It's part of your job, and so putting all those different hats on during the day is really one of the kind of the challenges, I think, to coaching. And I was really happy to hear Coach Lee say she's keeping the fitness thing going, and trying to fit that stuff in and take care of yourself is a really big part of this, and I think of any busy job. That's tough to do. And for my own day, then trying to figure out how to fit my 3 teenage kids into my day also, and get their supper made and get them to their sports and get back and do my practice, just adds another wrinkle to my whole day too. Wouldn't change any of it for the world, but it certainly does make it pretty busy. So I think that's also, and I will say for female coaches, like our male counterparts with families, they're busy too. What I hear over and over from young coaches, especially on the female side, is that question around, can I combine family with my career? How do I do that? So, in my view, there needs to be still, even in 2021, more discussions at the university level, at the administrative level, about how we can create situations for coaches to do both. How do we support our coaches to be able to do that? And I think that's a really key concern on the women's side of the game and the men's side, if you're thinking about a family at all. So it's a busy job, no doubt about it. I'm not as organized as Coach Lee sounds, so I'm going to have to phone her up after this and get a few pointers, I think.
Well, Coach T, that's because I ain't got no kids. I don't know how I would even do this if I had kids. So that's incredible.
And just even with what you make the kids cook and clean. Oh, that's hilarious. But even with what Coach T said, it really reminded me of something I heard in a previous panel with Coach Charles Kissy. He just said that when you're a coach, you like, it was crazy because it was just pretty much word for word in terms of what you were saying. But he also spoke to this idea of just having to wear so many hats and being such a versatile person for not just for your team, but just, the life you live. So it's amazing to see how much you're balancing and how much you continue to balance, especially when you think about, bringing that first national championship. Like, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it's just a testament to how well of a job you've been doing to balance things. So just kudos to you. But I guess now we have 3 more coaches we would love to hear from. And I guess whoever wants to start speaking first, the floor is yours. Yeah, this is the tough part about Zoom. It's like I can't point at one of you. I'm pointing at the squares, but it's like, okay, all right, Coach Tatham. Yeah, just I think that's great.
I don't see my day being much different than the others. It's a very busy day. You are wearing different hats. I would say that a lot of people don't understand how much goes into coaching. A lot of people want to be coaches, but they don't know how much you need to put into the job, on the court, off the court, creating relationships. It's a job, right? And it's something that you have to work at to be great at. And that's all I really want to add. I mean, my day is very much so similar to everyone else's.
And even through you speaking to that point about just not realizing how much goes into it, I guess this is just me thinking about the athlete side of things, but a lot of people, sorry, just people are still joining, admitting them. Even with like the grind of basketball, a lot of people will just think about the perks of, being an athlete and the cloud and things of that nature, but it often goes over a lot of people's heads, how many sprints you had to run, how many 3 in a rows or shots you had to make, and just all the blood, sweat, and tears, that you got to put in. So when I think about coaching, I've seen it through, your brother Pat and just one of his assistants, Arushi, but there's just so much that goes into it that people may see you, wearing your suit or wearing, like getting ready for the game, being there, but there's just a way much more that goes into it beyond that. And I hope, people just continue to recognize and respect that fact.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right, and Coach Roque, I'll give you a dribble handoff at the 45.
Yeah, great. I'm shooting the shot. Yeah, I love everything that's been touched on so far. Coach Lee talked about routine. Routine is huge for me, and just in terms of my day is not as quite organized, and I know for you, Lee, it's probably not organized, but that's how you tackle it. My day pre-COVID is really chaotic, I'll say. I chose this job because I knew it meant that I wouldn't be sitting behind a desk from 9 to 5. And so I love how active and social coaching keeps me. And I think this was like last year, a year or so ago, and one of my athletes asked me, like, Jess, what do you like do all day? Like before practice, like we see you at practice, but like, what do you actually do all day? And I think a lot of people don't understand how, and I think Teresa touched on it earlier, like how many connections you make in a day. And as head coaches, your program goes beyond just the players and the staff that you interact with on a day-to-day. There's alumni, there's people in your department, there's supporters of your program, and then there's the greater community. And so that can wear on people. That to me is actually the really exciting part of the job. I always say coaching and the actual practice part of coaching is probably like 10%. And maybe my numbers are a little off, but it's probably about 10% of the job. And the other 90% is, the things you do in preparation and the things you do outside of your 2-hour training session.
We could leave the numbers to some of the statisticians if there's any here, but it's definitely amazing to hear that, you're excited and you're willing to use your platform to have that community impact you do. And as important and crucial, especially when, Coach Tatham speaks to the things people don't know go behind the work. You're doing that with your team, but then you're also, making sure that you can make your mark in the community, which is very commendable. And you know what, to hand it off to Coach Lisa, I gave the handoff to Coach Roque. My defender iced at the 45, so she had to pitch it back. And now I'm reversing it over to Coach Thomaidis.
I'm always going to shoot it because that's about the do or could do back in the day. I think the interesting part is just how the roles have changed. 20 years ago, I would say 95% of my job was planning practice and watching game film, and then executing practice. That was it. To now the point where, and you had no assistant coaches that were paid really, so you had to do it all. And then so then you're doing individuals as well. And now to the point where the sport has grown, women's basketball in Canada has grown so much. Now you're like everyone has already said, but probably the planning practice and watching game film is now more down to about 10% of my job. There's so many other things that you have to do. It's the community outreach, it's the, you know, communication with donors, it's the on-campus relations, it's meeting with alumni, you know, player meetings, meeting with your assistant coaches if you have any that are full-time or honorarium. So yeah, and probably that's the part that I most likely wasn't prepared for. I think, you know, not to mention the recruiting, like I would do absolutely everything and leave the recruiting to the end, because I'm an introvert and like to pick up the phone is painful for me. Like I dread it. I don't want to talk to anyone on the phone, let alone a cold call to a 17-year-old that is, you know, you're trying to convince to come to the middle of the prairies to play basketball. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the transformation, I guess I'd say, just where it's been and now where it's going to, and probably the skill set associated with what you need to have to be a successful coach back then to now. Maybe you know, maybe you don't need to fill all those areas, but there's definitely more of an emphasis on a different part. I remember talking to our football coach way back when, and he said, you know, he was originally, he got into coaching to coach, but at the end of his career, he felt more like a general manager, because you're more managing people and people who work for you and your athletes and everything else, all your stakeholders, as opposed to spending the majority of your time actually coaching. And I'd say for me, like even the last, you know, 5-10 years, I felt like a little bit more of a disconnect with me and the student athletes, because I used to be in the gym all the time with them, you know, spending tons of time doing indies with them, and now it's an assistant coach that's doing it, or more player meetings or more film or more this or more that, where now a lot of my time is devoted to some other things. So I think that's the interesting part too, is just, again, how many different roles you need to be able to play.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about how you've been balancing it, you know, we could all definitely see the success in how you've been doing it as well. And I guess when I think about how I could transition to the next question, you know, you touched on a very good point. You said there are certain things that you might have had to have before as a coach that you may not need now. So it kind of sounds like you're talking about a transition in terms of what's expected of a coach, you know, and I believe that just brings me straight to what Coach Boiago wants to ask all of you.
Thanks, Quasi. Yeah, I've been excited about this question. I think a lot of people have heard Coach Thomaidis talk about how Coach Burns was one of her coaches and one of her big role models. And that's similar to me as well. Coach Burns has been my mentor and my coach, and now who I coach with. So Coach Lisa, I'm coming straight back to you for this one. What's something, if there's anything in particular that you learned from Coach that you've taken into your coaching style? And then second part to that question is, what do you want your players to learn and take away from you and your coaching style?
Yeah, well, pretty much everything. You know, when you're a young coach and you go straight from being a player, you know, got a chance to work with Teresa for a couple of years before I got a head coaching position. Really, I think you coach how you were coached. So all I knew was how Teresa coached me, and then I got to play pro for a couple of years and probably more figured out how I didn't want to coach. So I kind of had the two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Like I kind of had this gold medal model with Tree, and then I got to see a different style and figured out, oh, that's not really how I want to do it. But I think, you know, for Teresa, what Teresa did for me, again, like I said at the beginning, was really teach me the value of hard work, and to really, to care, I guess. If you're going to go after something, you know, how much you have to care about it and the work that needs to be put in to go after, you know, what you're trying to accomplish. So that was huge for me. You know, before Teresa coached me, I really was, I'd say very just like vanilla, you know, like didn't really care that much, kind of did it because I was good and tall and had enough success, but wasn't great, didn't really aspire to be great. And so, you know, she certainly inspired me to at least go after those things and to really care more about it. So that was, you know, key turning point for me, I'd say, as an athlete and then as a coach. And then the other thing, I think, when you're not an athlete like Tamara that can just like I'm just joking, T, like just a shout out to you. You're such an amazing athlete. But for me, I wasn't an overpowering athlete, right? So you had to kind of start thinking about how can you outsmart your opponent? How can you gain an advantage on them if you're not going to be more physical or a better athlete? And I think Teresa really helped me start to think the game and strategize and figure out different ways to be successful against opponents and teams. So really sparked an interest in the game that way. So I guess the second part to your question then is, what do I hope my players would learn from me if they want to go into coaching? Again, I think it was born out of necessity to try to be competitive at Canada West Conference that had produced the last, I don't know, 10 or so national champions, and we were a team that just didn't win. And so I had to try to figure out how can we outsmart some of our opposition. And I guess I would hope that our players would learn from me to be meticulous in your preparation and to figure out what are some of those small things that lead to a big advantage, or small things that can give you an upper hand on teams that you're playing that might be or probably more talented than you are. So trying to outsmart and figure things out from that perspective. So that would be what I would say. Thanks for the question.
That's interesting that you say that, because watching you coach and watching Coach Burns coach, one of the similarities that I noticed between both of you is just that attention to detail. And that's something that Coach harps on all the time. And we watch your teams warm up. At Nationals, we would watch your team warm up. And just that attention to detail that was happening in a warm up was incredible. So that definitely stems from you, but that's something that I see in Coach as well. So Coach, I want to go to you next. You're so modest and you don't talk about all of these people that you've touched and that you've influenced throughout the years, but your coaching tree just continues to grow. And I know that we're all so lucky. I'm so lucky to have you as a mentor. What's something that you want your players to take from you, to learn from you, whether that's going into coaching or going into the real world after basketball?
Well, thanks, Dee. And thanks, Lisa, for the very kind words. I will just tell people quickly before we move to the question that I could see in Lisa when she did have that turning point in her career where she recognized how much she cared about the game and recognized just how good she could be. And you could tell right away, as such an intelligent person, intelligent student athlete, the way she thought the game, you could see right away that she was gonna have a fantastic career in coaching if she so desired. And obviously that's played out to be true. And really, personally, I consider her the best coach in the country. And what she's done for Canadian basketball and women's basketball has been absolutely incredible. And so very, very proud of that relationship in the past and our friendship that's stayed so strong over the years. And I think for my athletes, that's part of what I want them to take away. It's learning about the relationship part of this. And relationships really are such a big part and really mean everything. I learned that from one of my biggest mentors in my life, Trace Quigley, who was our athletic director at MAC, and the woman who hired me and who I honestly owe my life to, for giving me the opportunity to do what I do every day. And what I learned from her is that, you need to work hard. Passion has to be there, but it can never, ever be at the expense of forgetting about the relationships. And she used to amaze me with the way she could walk down a hallway and she had 600 or 700 varsity athletes in our programs at MAC, and she would know almost all of them by name. It was astounding to me, but it certainly drove the point home. And so for our athletes, we talk every day about relationships and respect and how do we make each other better every day? What do you bring to the team that will make each of us stronger and us stronger as a unit? And I think that's a way to look at things that, whether you're in coaching or whatever your career is, will be helpful to you. And I really hope that our young women on our team find their voice. We talk a lot about having a voice. Your voice is unique to you and it's so special, and you need to be proud of your voice and who you are, and bring your voice to the world, and because the world will be a better place if you do. So anything we can do day in and day out to kind of empower our players, our athletes, our staff, the people in our program, to really go out into the world as a strong, capable, intelligent, confident young woman, and take your voice out into the world and make a difference, because we need you. That would be, I think, if I summed it up, if I could. There's lots of things, but if I could sum it up, it would probably be something like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. And a couple of weeks ago, Coach said the same thing to our players, how it's important to use your voice, but when you are using your voice, make sure it's yours and it's not someone else's. So that's just to sum it all up. That's the kind of message that Coach is sharing with our players each day, which is amazing to be a part of. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk to our young guns. So we have some very inspirational up and coming head coaches. So Jess, I want to start with you and just talk a little bit about your transition from player to assistant coach, and then assistant coach to head coach. And did you know you were ready to jump into that head coach position? Are you ever ready? Do you ever feel ready? Yeah, just talk about that experience and what that's been like the past year for you.
First off, can you call us young guns? Are we young guns, or are you a young gun? No, I think I feel like I have a pretty unique story in that I didn't always know I was going to get into coaching. I think it was just kind of a natural transition. I don't share this often, but I'll share it now since it's relevant. I was actually in grad school at Mac to do physio, and I had prior to then served as a graduate assistant, and I just kind of stayed on with my alma mater because I wanted to pursue a physio degree. So I actually had no intentions to coach whatsoever. It was just in line with the career path that I thought that I wanted for myself. But it turns out that physio wasn't for me. And so I think the same week that I had flunked out of the program at Mac, my head coach hit me up and offered me a position on her staff since I had previously served as a graduate assistant. So happily I accepted, and little did I know that I would be making a career out of it 6 years later. But I think the things that I was doing prior to, I'll say even in my playing years, like I was a captain for 3 out of my 4 collegiate years playing. As I was a captain of my team in high school. And so a lot of the ways in my leadership style, I still use to this day in how I coach. But then I've just always found ways to be a part of basketball. So even when I was going through school, I was always involved with, whether it was my university team or club team. I was always finding ways to stay involved with the sport because for those of you on this call know, like, basketball is probably your first love, and it doesn't just kind of go away. And I think those opportunities, and then even coming to Canada, like working for Carly and having her, have a full-time position at Ryerson was another opportunity that I'm super grateful for, because it gave me a chance to further grow in my career, but even in my love for the game and my love for this side of the game as opposed to playing. So it definitely wasn't where I saw myself, but I'm so grateful and so happy that I did come to this realization, because I actually do feel now that I was meant to do this all along. And I say to our athletes all the time, when they're going through their majors and trying to figure out what they want to study and who they want to be, it's okay to not know. But just, I think if you continue to pursue the things that you're passionate about and that you want, you'll end up in the place that you're always meant to be. And so, although my pathway wasn't linear, I'll say there was great learning in the failures that I did experience, and I wouldn't have had it any other way.
That's amazing. Everything happens for a reason, Jess. And I know I speak on behalf of everyone that we're so excited to watch you next season with whatever the season looks like. I know you're going to do great. So it's exciting to see you in that position. T, I'm going to come to you next, because you probably felt like you could have just jumped in when you started with Michelle at U of T. How did you have that itch to, like, coach, sub me in, like, I still want to play? Or how was that transition for you when you were working with Michelle?
So I did, like just didn't know coaching was going to be my avenue. I was playing for 10 years professionally. And during my last season, I kind of knew I kind of wanted to hang up my shoes. But it took me a little while to like actually do it. I actually signed a pro contract to play in France that year in 2017 when I got the job at U of T. But at the same time, I was taking some coaching courses. The year before, I was home for half of the season coaching with my sister with the jewel team, and that was really cool. I found that really inspiring and really cool to kind of see how you can impact these young lives on the court and off the court. So I definitely thought coaching could be an avenue at that time. So I did take some courses, and then I got an opportunity. Right, someone told me the job was open and to apply for it. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. If I stay home right in the heart of the city, I could do this, or I can go back overseas. Who knows? I got an interview and I ended up getting the job, and I had to make a big decision. And my faith took me to coaching. So that's how I kind of got into it. And during that time, it was good. I mean, Michelle gave me the opportunity to really coach, right? Like to give me the opportunity to just jump off the deep end and jump into the deep end. And she was able to really teach me that piece of just kind of coaching and giving what you can to your athletes at any given moment. So I know for me as an elite athlete, I was playing the game, I was studying it, I was living it, I was breathing it, but to teach it was a whole nother story. And that's the opportunity that Michelle gave me right away. And I had to learn, knowing the game helped me right away, right? It wasn't easy. I had to really figure out the language and how to say certain things. Like I knew what I wanted them to do, but I didn't know how to tell them what I wanted to do, what I wanted them to do. So that was the transition into coaching. And it was seamless. It was good. My years of experience as a player really helped me. And then I guess in terms of knowing I was ready to be a head coach. I guess you don't really ever know when you're ready to do things. It kind of just happens. Like I said, I didn't know I was ready to be a basketball coach. And it happened for me, and I took it and I ran with it, and then putting everything I put everything I could and everything I had into it the same way I did with basketball. So that's what I'm doing as a head coach, and I'm now the decision maker, which is a lot different than being an assistant. And sometimes you'll make the right decision, sometimes you'll make the wrong decision. But for me, I just always go with my gut and learn along the way. So that's nice.
Thanks, T. Wow, those Jewel girls must have been so lucky to have you, an Olympian, as a coach, and even your U of T women as well. I know they're going to learn so much from you. But yeah, so true what you said about like, okay, I know what to do now. How do I explain what to do in this drill, right? It's that other level of thinking. Lee, we'll come to you to finish this question off. You've been at St. FX for 3 years now. I think this is your 3rd season. So just how has it been learning from year 1 until now? And I know you've probably learned so much just by learning yourself and going through the motions.
Yeah, this journey through sport has been a really interesting one for me, because it's hard for me to look at kind of my year 1 as a youth sport coach to now. I kind of feel like I'm in 4 quarters of my life, and there was like a first quarter, a second quarter. I think I'm in my 3rd quarter, and that's how I've been like in my mind, looking at my journey. Where I grew up in Jane and Finch, our community volunteers, and more specifically our basketball coaches, literally saved lives. Like that was their job. It was like, these guys are not going to be out on the street. We're going to get them in the gym. We're going to empower them. We're going to educate them. Oftentimes our parents were working and wouldn't know where we were around the clock. And that certainly was the situation for me. I really love the game because it's out, like I've had God and I've had basketball. And there's been times in my life where I haven't had any family, or I haven't had a place to live, or I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. So the love I have for this game, I don't think is limited to any level that I've coached at. But like, that's why I'm so passionate about it. It's done everything for me. It's the reason why I'm here today. And to echo Coach's sentiments, it's like, I've got an overwhelming amount of love for the game. And I think the work ethic that I had as a prospective athlete coming up. So like growing up, I didn't even know, I didn't know what OBA was until I was introduced by it by one of the older girls who would play. And I actually started going to a local community center and watching girls like Tamara Tatham and her sister and the Kalisha Keens kind of play. And I was always young girl. So I was always kind of on the bench, yo, young girl. Nobody ever knew my name, but I was like, man, like, this is so cool. It's where all my happiness came from. It was the only thing that had me driven to succeed academically. So it was just kind of ingrained in my mind from my coaches. Listen, you got to do well in school, and then you do well in basketball, and then you could get a degree, and that's why your mom is making all these sacrifices. And so basketball really was part of that equation for me. And it's provided me opportunities to travel around, I wouldn't say the world, because I haven't actually been many places internationally, but certainly meeting new people throughout North America has been just an incredible experience. I was able to play at the NCAA BCS level, as well as the junior college level and the youth sport level. And I've taken those lived experiences and I try to, at the very least, provide a different lens or perspective as to how we can coach and how we can service athletes. But yeah, it's hard for me to look at my last 3 years as kind of an isolated journey, and more as kind of just something that's ongoing. And I don't really know what the future has in store for me, because if many people on here are familiar with youth sport, we just celebrated Steve Conchalsi, who's an Olympian coach. He's been coaching for 46 years, 919 wins or something like that. And that is a tall measure. I'm like, 46 years of coaching in one place. I mean, I'm kind of thinking like, dang, will I even do 46 years of anything? Like, I'm only 30, right? Like, so it's an incredible journey I'm on. I feel like I'm always learning. I know I'm not answering the question directly, but it's just tough for me to look at the last 3 years. I think it's definitely part of my ongoing journey and constant learning.
No, that's amazing. Thanks, Lee. And same with you. You're inspiring so many. So just keep doing what you're doing. And I think what you said about, like, you truly have to love what you do in any job, but especially a job like coaching, when you're away on weekends and you're away from your family during, like, at nighttime too as well. So the fact that you still continue to love what you're doing, it's so important as a coach. And I just want to build off what you said about the men's coach at St. FX, because I was joking with Coach Burns that she's still got 17 more years to go if she wants to beat him. So she's not leaving us yet. I just want to say, for the people that have joined us, if you have a question and you want answered, you can put it in the chat. And if we have some time at the end, I will definitely try to get to them. But I have one last question for our panelists, and then we can hopefully get to some Q&A. So LT, I'm going to come back to you to start us off with this one. Advice, it can be one piece of advice, a couple things for the young coaches that are on this call, or just people wanting to get into youth sports coaching in general. If you could sum it up in one or two things, some advice that you have for us.
Well, I think at the youth sport level, no matter how supportive your university is, you have to have the support of your community. You need those people who are committed and invested and believe in you and your program if you're going to see the ultimate success. That'd be one. And then the other one is get a mentor. I mean, that truly was, career altering for me, is not only having Teresa as a mentor and someone to be able to bounce ideas off of, but also Allison McNeil during my time working as an assistant with her. Yeah, again, back in the day, you did not know how anyone else ran their programs, ran practice, prepared for games. Like, you're in a vacuum. And so you need to understand and see other coaches do their thing. And you need to have varying ideas to help you grow and continue to improve. So those would be my two real quick ones and we can move on. I want to hear what everyone else's are.
Okay, Coach, we'll go to you from that one.
Me? Yeah, I agree with Lisa. You've got to be part of your community and connect your community to your program for sure. Seek out feedback. Don't be scared of feedback. Talk to coaches. Talk to women's coaches, men's coaches, any coach you can find. But as much as we ask our athletes to be accountable, take personal accountability, your performance is your own. You're responsible for your performance. We're here to support you, but you're responsible. Well, as a coach, I don't see it any differently. And so don't be scared to go out and seek feedback about the way you do your job and how you do your job, and talk to people you trust and learn. It's a lifelong process. You will learn from now till the end of your coaching days. And as Lisa said, it's tough sometimes because we're all in our vacuum with our own program. So try to seek out opportunities, whether it's something like this tonight, coaching clinics, just ways for you to connect with other coaches so that you can exchange ideas, because that's where you really learn and grow. And it's hard to do with our busy schedules. So you have to be very intentional about seeking out those opportunities to learn.
I think that's the one blessing of COVID, is just this extra time that we've all been given to have calls like this and to connect and to reach out to other coaches. And kudos to all of you for taking the time to share and just learn with each other. It's amazing. Jess, coming over to you. Any advice?
Yeah, I think I'm like taking mental notes from these two great coaches. Obviously, to echo kind of what Lisa was saying around mentors, I'm stealing this one from actually Carly. So Carly has been and still is a great mentor of mine, and transitioning from an assistant coach to a head coach. And one of the things, she would say to me often is, you don't know what you don't know until you do it. And so I'm kind of living that now, but I would say even to young coaches such as yourself, or even other people that are, considering taking on a new team or stepping into a new role, is get out and actually coach. It like I said, it served me well in my experience, but the best teacher can be your own experience as well. And then the second thing I'll say in terms of advice is everyone has their own pathway, so make sure you're being true and authentic to yours. And a bunch of different perspectives have been shared already. Like, not everyone's going to be an Olympian like T. If you can be, then more power to you, but make sure that you're finding, your way, and you can't always look at how others are doing it. So mentors do help, but make sure you're being authentic to yourself as well.
Yeah, that's huge. Thanks, Jess. Okay, T, Olympian, give us some advice. What do you got?
Well, I mean, everything that's been said so far is great. I definitely advise all of that. But for me, a little addition into there would be, I guess, becoming a transformational leader. We're coaching a new age of athletes, and we have to find ways to continue to get to know our athletes, know what they need, and just create those relationships. We're so busy, but we can never be too busy for the athletes whose lives we are impacting at this age, right? And we are at a stage where we are impacting their lives as they go into the real world one day. So just really getting to know your athletes and being a transformational leader is the advice I would give.
That's huge. Thanks, T. And then Coach Lee, you mentioned earlier we played against each other when you were at Laurier. So it's amazing for me to see you transition from the amazing player that you were to the coach that you are now. So what advice can you give to other coaches that are looking to be in your position?
I wrote a few things down. Well, I've been writing the whole meeting because to me, this is professional development. So I'm learning from the greats. So I have written down here first is trust God. And if you're not a believer, then establish and find some trust in whatever your anchor is. So like, what is that thing that you know is always going to be there for you? And I think a big shift for me while I was a player was just kind of understanding that you know, I'm walking in victory because the Lord is behind me. And so that's kind of my first piece of advice. And if you're not a believer, again, what is your anchor? The second thing was a piece of advice I got when I first got here at St. FX from Graham Kennedy, who's our soccer coach. And he said, Lee, you know, as a coach, you always have to consider, do you want to be remembered for the last thing you said or the last interaction you had? Like in terms of what you did in that interaction. And so nobody has ever said anything like that to me before. And I'm usually like just bouncing off the walls, joking, like, you know, all that kind of stuff. But then I started to think, holy smokes, he's right. Like the very last thing I said to someone, the last thing I did, how do I want to be remembered? You know, what's the last Instagram story I post? You know, those are the things that I kind of think about. And then I would also say, and I know some of our coaches have mentioned this, is don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think in being a young coach, like I was really overwhelmed while also trying to learn different things. I didn't have a mentor, and I've been just trying to understand that difference and having the humility. I work with an incredible amount of coaches. I'm also fortunate enough to be kind of mentored by other female coaches that are older than me and have kind of walked this path. And so not being afraid to ask for help and showing vulnerability is a big one. Probably like growing up, I don't know if I ever cried in front of anyone, like maybe once or twice. And in the past few years, I can't believe how much I've cried. Like it's kind of embarrassing now. But I think just as you get to know yourself more and part of showing that vulnerability is in a sense also asking for help.
A lot of people think asking questions is just kind of like a sign of weakness, but you're right, Lee. It's probably so important, probably one of the most important things. And it's definitely a sign of strength to realize you need to ask and you want that feedback. So thank you all for all the advice. I'm taking all of that to heart. We have a couple questions. If coaches still have a little bit of time, Kwasi, I'll ask one here. I don't want to direct it to anyone, but coaches, if anyone wants to take this one, just let me know, feel free. How do you see the recruiting process changing in the current environment? So especially with no basketball being played in a lot of Canada right now. It's a tough question. That's a good one.
I can just jump in. I think the student athletes have to take on a much more active role in this because, you know, we haven't been able to see players play this year. I mean, I know I've received a ton of emails, more so than in the past, like people reaching out, and I love it. Like, that's what I want. Like, not that we shouldn't. I think it shows a lot of initiative. I love when people reach out and put themselves out there. I will read every email, watch every video when people send them to me, because obviously it takes effort to do that. It means they're serious. But I think we all really feel for those grade 12 student athletes, the first years as well, and the grade 11s. There's just no opportunity to showcase what they can do. And so just finding ways for them to stand out from the rest is going to be a unique challenge. And then, for us as coaches, like we have to kind of take a leap of faith on some commitments for the upcoming year. It's difficult when we have full rosters and people aren't necessarily leaving and creating space, but you can always find space for the ones that, show that initiative, have tremendous character. Certainly there's a level of talent that needs to be there, but I think if you can showcase a lot of those intangibles, it certainly piques our interest.
You're going to be getting a lot of emails after this, Coach. There was another question in the chat about just the social aspect of coaching and potentially talking about work-life balance / like the loneliness that might come with the pressure of being a head coach. If anyone wants to take on that question.
I'll speak to that one a little bit, I guess, and just more on my personal reflections. I think some of the challenges for me have come from kind of being from West End Toronto and moving to rural Nova Scotia. And I got a little bit of practice when I was at TRC Academy because we're in a small town called Brantford. But I've always been like an hour and a half away from civilization, right? And just from people that I connect with, people that more often not look like me, that understand my language, and being a first generation. And so, I mean, how do I try to overcome that? I think if anything, COVID has shifted my mentality. I mean, I used to be super paranoid about answering calls that I just didn't even know. Even as a coach, like I'm like, what is that? I'm not answering. And now I'm like jumping on Zoom calls with people I've never met before. And so it really, from that comfortability standpoint, has challenged me. I think it really got me through a really tough period as well when COVID hit, because of course everything was shut down. But I went from just having this, a million and one things to do in a day to pretty much staring at a blank wall. And if it wasn't for the many phone calls and Zoom calls and so forth, I don't know how I would have got through that period. And so I guess that's how I'm overcoming a little bit of that social piece.
Thanks, Lee. Another question here. There's 16 female basketball players on the call from Newfoundland. And as the coach, what are the main things to focus on to help them get recognized and possibly play at the youth sport level, especially because there's only one university in Newfoundland? Thank you for joining the call, by the way. Coaches, if anyone wants to take that one.
I can take that one. We would say, first off, make sure you email Lisa. But no, in all seriousness, I think having really great fundamentals is actually, I feel like, something that's often overlooked, even at our level. And I can even recall being in the NCAA, you would be surprised how many athletes make it to that level and don't have fundamentals down, like footwork, being able to finish with both hands. In the age of technology, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the hype, and I call it like sexy training, if you will. And so I would just say keep it really, really simple. If your athletes can compete and be really great, like Lisa was saying, to those intangibles, those are the things that I see. So when I'm watching game film that an athlete sends, and you're showing me like 5 clips of your girls diving on the floor or helping teammates up, and they're making buckets, like that's gonna really stand out and be something that any coach would want to bring to their program. So I would say keep it simple in terms of what's actually being taught, but make sure they have fundamentals down. And
can I build on that?
Yeah, go for it, Lee.
My perspective, this might be different for coaches. So having coached a fair deal on the boys side and the girls side, I find with our young female basketball players an obsession with the position that you play. And my advice would be try to be the best you and work on all your skills. And to echo Coach Jessica's point about being good at the fundamentals, what I found is there's been a lot of obsessiveness around I'm a wing, I'm a point guard, I'm a shooting guard, and really and truly you're a basketball player, right? And the best players in the world right now can do multiple things, right? They're complete athletes. They can handle the ball, they can pass against pressure, they certainly can hit a standstill shot. And so part of my advice would be from a growth mentality standpoint, be less concerned about the position you play and what you can or can't do, because that's what coaches are looking for. Like what are the things that you can do, and then where are your growth areas? Instead of, I think I'm a wing, I think I'm a center. I think your game will show you where your strengths are.
Yeah, thanks, Lee and Jess, both really good points. And building off of that too, like put yourself out there, like Coach LT has said, like send an email, send film. We're always watching film and looking at emails that people send as well. Kwasi, I'm going to send it back over to you. I think you had a couple last questions before we wrap up for the call.
I guess, thank you for that, Danielle. The first thing I want to say, I guess if, people could just show some love, whether it's through reactions, whether it's through things in the chat, but I'm just really happy for what a great panel we had today. So I know we're all muted and everything, but I'd love to see some reactions, because this has just been an amazing time. And I know I've just taken so much from this whole experience. Yeah, I'm seeing the reaction. This is nice. But the first thing I just want to say, is just like a huge thank you to the panelists and the moderators. This event literally wouldn't have been possible without your presence and just the things you've done in your life to get to this point. You know, you've inspired so many along the way, and you have continued to inspire tonight. So I just wholeheartedly want to salute you. I want to thank everyone that's like helped me push this idea, you know, especially, you know, like Moad, Mac Athletics, like my brothers, like just all of my friends. I'm even seeing people in the chat, like Tris, like people like Brandon. I can keep saying names, but there's just even a lot of people in this call who have just been with me from the start. And I just, like, I appreciate all of you. Sefa, I guess you too. I'm not trying to miss, I could keep going, but I just want to be mindful of time, but just a lot of you, I rate you, I appreciate you, you know, the vibes. In terms of just a quick wrapping up thing I want to say, I started running these panels just because of the pandemic, and I just wanted to, you know, create this space for just basketball players and just coaches to just come and realize, you know, we often get so caught up in the game and just improving ourselves that we miss sight of so much in the fact that, you know, we're navigating this journey of life and just focusing on the wins and the losses, but there's a lot more than that. You know, there's a lot more than the numbers. It's who we are, you know, when the game's done, when the buzzer goes off. And I've just been happy to see how this has grown. In terms of what's next, I'm always looking and open to new ideas. I tried to apply a lot of internships. They have dissed me, so I have a lot more time to dedicate to this organization or just whatever initiatives any of you could think of, but I'm just more than happy to continue finding ways to provide these venues and different ways to grow. One thing that's in the early stages, I still have some people to talk to, but I'm trying to compile some sort of ebook or book or something to summarize a lot of the bits and pieces of knowledge, not just in this conversation, but that I've gathered, not just through my playing days, but hearing a lot of these amazing coaches and players, because I just feel like there's just so much to learn from this game of basketball. And like even Coach Lee had a point about, you know, you're not a wing, you're not a guard, you're like a basketball player. And even just, you know, providing a venue to speak to what it means to be a basketball player and just being a star in your role. Like, I want to create some kind of book to touch on that and just make it interesting. You know what I mean? But that's like, that'll be a whole project. But I just say, follow me on Instagram at the Reach Series just to stay up to date with what I'm doing. If you have any ideas for things I could do, like I'm gonna do some public speaking for a private school in a couple of weeks. If anyone wants to hit me up for anything, just feel free. I'm always happy to just, you know, the game won't leave me in any shape or capacity. I'm always happy. So like I said, I was mindful of the time. It's 7:57. If anyone has any last minute questions or anything, I'm done, but I just want to say thank you.
Kwesi, I want to say thank you to you for leading and for our other young trailblazers here. If there's anything I've seen for sure in the last year, it's like your generation has really stepped up in so many ways, and it's really, really inspiring for me. It makes me feel like I need to do more in any way that I can support you in your transition and aspiring to accomplish your goals. Please let me know. I also wanted to shout out Coach T and Coach Lisa, because you guys are like just the go to the game, and it's a blessing and an honor to kind of share the stage with you. And I'm really looking forward to watching our national team play and win some games.
Same here, same here. Thanks everyone. Thanks Kwasi, Danielle, Nemo, fellow coaches and colleagues, and people I look up to. Great to share the last 90 minutes with you, and hopefully we can do it again before too long.
Thanks everyone. It's been a great night. Really appreciate it. Kwasi, well done as always.
I appreciate it. I'm always happy to create these platforms.
Definitely want to say thank you to all the panelists and the moderators. Kwasi, thank you so much for inviting me. Nemo, Danielle, great job. It's so inspiring, like Lisa, to see what's happening, and I'm just so thrilled and ecstatic to be a part of it. So thank you.
The next one's in person, right?
Whatever, like I'm gonna be in Toronto. I'm doing my master's at Ryerson.
Okay, there you go.
If it's gonna happen, I'll probably be in Toronto. But we all have I have your emails. You know, we'll find ways. But I just hope we can continue to find ways to grow this game, and I'm happy to be a part of this. So happy to help you any way I can, like each and every one of you. So yeah.
Amen. Right back at you. Thanks again, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Kwasi. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, good job. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Right.